Continue to follow the breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Notre Dame not going far to find its next head coach, staying in-house and promoting defensive coordinator and former NFL linebacker Marcus Freeman to head coach. This past season was his first with the program. Now he's a first-time head coach, replacing Brian Kelly, who left Notre Dame for LSU on Monday. Kelly wanted to bring Freeman to Baton Rouge. Instead, Freeman staying in South Bend, and so is Tommy Rees, who will remain as offensive coordinator. Let's welcome in former Notre Dame great Brady Quinn. Brady, your reaction here to Marcus Freeman being named head coach at Notre Dame as he replaces Brian Kelly?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing was, from listening to Jack Swarbrick, who spoke after Brian Kelly decided to resign and take that coaching job at LSU, is you thought this process was going to be a little bit more methodical and patient, take a little more time. But with the comments from Gary Barta and the College Football Playoff Committee, it started to expedite the process of still giving this year's team a chance. And I think you could tell the College Football Playoff Committee didn't like where Notre Dame sat without a head coach. And Jack Swarbrick, who was leading this search for a head coach, if you even call it that, met with Marcus Freeman for a long time today. And I think Marcus provided a vision for them and kind of a roadmap for what he's thinking as a head coach moving forward. And that was contingent upon Tommy Rees being the offensive coordinator to keep that continuity amongst their staff. Now, Marcus Freeman will end up taking over as head coach. Mike Elston will end up calling the defense. But that's, at least in the foreseeable future, how this is going to go. They're still working out the details of the contract. But this entire process was expedited because of the short-term concern about being left out if things happen right this weekend for them in this year's college football playoff, and with that December 15th date coming up, and a lot of their commits and recruits who love Marcus Freeman and who have campaigned for Marcus Freeman over the past 48 hours, as well as some of the current players, I think between him making a compelling case as to why he should be the man and everyone else who was campaigning for him, it ultimately won over Jack Swarbrick, who I think wanted to wait for some other head coaches, one in particular in Cincinnati and Luke Fickell that's still out there playing. But this, to me, is a guy who's played at the highest level. He understands that. He understands the whole process of that. He communicates extremely well. And so, look, again, there's going to be a learning curve, and who knows how that's going to play itself out. But at least in the short term, they're keeping the continuity of, I think, what you saw a lot on the field this year. Because let's be real, Brian Kelly didn't call plays on offense. He didn't intervene on the defense. He just kind of oversaw and managed the whole thing. And so these are really the two brains behind what you saw offensively and defensively this year on offense for Notre Dame, and really the guys who should be credited for their growth. So the next question becomes, can Marcus Freeman learn how to manage all that like Brian Kelly did during his time there?
Do you think nationally this will be viewed as a hasty move?
That's a tough question to answer. I think time will tell. If it works, obviously not. If it doesn't end up working, then potentially. They'll point back to this, and they'll say maybe it was a bit rushed. I had someone contact me who's a part of a search committee at a search firm, and they said, hey, do you want to contact Jack Swarbrick? Do you want to contact some people at Notre Dame and use our services? And if not even for the coaching search, at least for background checks, those sorts of things. And so, when Jack Swarbrick decided to do this on his own, you kind of take out a lot of layers of this process that typically take place when you really vet and get to see everyone out there who's potentially looking to come to Notre Dame. It's a big job. It's one of the most unique jobs you'll find in all of football, NFL, or college. And so the fact they basically bypassed that whole process, it tells you one of two things. Either Jack Swarbrick really likes where this program's at, which it's hard to deny that based on the past 5 years, or he feels really impressed by what Marcus Freeman has shown in the short time that he's been there. And maybe both of those things are true. And so I think that's what the decision more comes down to, at least in the short term. But, again, hindsight's always 20/20.
Brady, from a player's perspective, how do you think the players are feeling right now as they've gone through this tumultuous week so far?
They're so excited. I mean, this to them was probably the best outcome because, they're familiar with Marcus Freeman. They love Marcus Freeman. A lot of these players, you could tell, even some of the kids who've got a podcast on one of those NIL deals, Kyle Hamilton in particular, was already out there saying that's who we want. They've been very vocal about this. And so the fact that they get not only Marcus, but they also get Tommy Rees staying, I think they're guys that they connect with. They're guys that they love. They're guys that they're excited about. So for those, and another other piece of all this too is Bayless, their strength coach. That was another huge get. In fact, that was the first piece. You know, Tommy Rees obviously made this announcement first. Marcus Freeman, now it's been confirmed. They'll work out the details in the contract tomorrow. But Bayless, the strength coach, was the other piece. Those are the three central pieces you really need when talking about your head coach and coordinators, and then being able to have that strength coach as well, since those guys are with the players throughout the entire year. So they're intact now, and I think that's what the players are excited about, is they love all the guys who are there guiding them now moving forward. And I think they'll use Brian Kelly leaving, the way he left, and the things that became public that he said to LSU as motivation moving forward.
How do you think this will impact recruiting? Because we've seen a trend here where some head coaches, some young guys, getting their first shot at being a head coach. And Marcus Freeman's a young guy. This will be his first job as a head coach. How do you think that impacts recruiting, especially that he stays on and doesn't follow Brian Kelly to LSU?
That was one of the biggest reasons why they hired him in the first place. Is he's been renowned as a great recruiter. And if you look at last year's class, they were number 9 based on 24/7 Sports rankings. This year, their class, I believe, was number 4 last time I looked, and next year's is number 2. So I don't suspect that's going to change at all. He's been one of the key. He's really been the linchpin in the entire recruiting process as far as generating more excitement. Being able to just knock on more doors and get more living rooms to talk to a lot of these parents. So they won't have any issue whatsoever with recruiting. I mean, he's known as one of the best recruiters there is in college football. So that's not a concern whatsoever.
Brady, as a Notre Dame alum, I know you're rooting for chaos this weekend. I'm rooting for chaos this weekend. Do you sense from the people that you're speaking with, the people you're talking to, that they're also kind of rooting for the chaos that Notre Dame somehow squeaks in and finds itself back in the college football playoff?
I think there's a feeling, and I was talking with Danny Cannell earlier today on CBS Sports HQ, just about, kind of this, like, the way they were abandoned by Brian Kelly. And look, no one's going to fault Brian Kelly for taking a $95 million, contract, or, saying, hey, I feel like I have a better opportunity here to win a national championship. Okay, so be it. But at least wait and see if this team has a chance of winning a national championship if you really think they're a top 4 team. And that's what he said to him on his way out. And so if you really believe that, then why leave before you know? Because now he could be sitting in Baton Rouge, and meanwhile these guys find their way in. So, to me, I kind of look at it and think, there's a lot of people who have witnessed what's transpired the past 72 hours, and they're like, I might not be a Notre Dame fan, but what that guy did was wrong, and I'm rooting for that team to have a chance to get in there and play. Like, I almost feel like there's a lot of people out there who want to see, like, the awkwardness and that storyline play out and become a reality. Look, I'm biased. I want those guys in there. I'm rooting for those guys to get in there. I think they've continually gotten better, and they're playing some of the best football of any team in college football at the end of the year. But you're right. They need Alabama to lose. They probably need Michigan or Cincinnati to lose as well in order for them to be able to have a shot at getting in. And that's the reality of the position that they're in, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a shot.
Well, me, as an Ohio State fan, I'm rooting for chaos because I don't usually root for Notre Dame, but and Notre Dame's not playing, and maybe their biggest win will come off the field this weekend if they can get some dominoes to fall. But the big news out of South Bend, Marcus Freeman named new head coach as he replaces Brian Kelly heading to LSU. Brady Quinn, Notre Dame great, join us here on CBS Sports HQ. Brady, appreciate the time, the perspective. And here's a look at Notre Dame's college football playoff resume. 6th in the rankings, 11-1. They only lost to Cincinnati, who sits right now in the top 4. Strength of schedule was 50th. Notable wins were against Purdue and Wisconsin. But again, they need some help to get into the college football playoff. They're going to need some losses. They're going to need Oklahoma State to lose, perhaps Cincinnati and Michigan to get a spot back into the college football playoff.